Yes. The first interview was with Officer Hunter, and I told him, you know, I can't really remember too well. I'm still beat up. And then the last interview, I think, was with Officer Cools, and I had already been like kind of asleep, and I told him this isn't going to be accurate because I'm exhausted.
Let's take a look at specifically what was said.
Okay.
Let's start as early on as page 27. By the way, do you recall the prosecutor asking you about any statements you made prior to page 27 during your cross-exam?
No.
Let me know when you're at page 27, Stephen.
I'm there.
Do you discuss this issue between lines 18 and 22?
Yes.
What was said between those lines?
Mr. Jones, I mean, it's not going to be very accurate because I can't remember very well. Question, absolutely, that's understandable. Mr. Jones, I was scared shitless. Those guys were huge.
Turn to page 87, please. Between the last line on page 87 and the first line on the following page, do you also express the officers some concern about your ability to recall what happened?
Yes.
What do you say on those two lines?
I said, there's so much adrenaline, I can't remember much. That's it to the best of my knowledge.
Turn to page 139, please, Stephen.
Okay.
You see on lines 8 through 9 where you're asked, so before they get here, do you mind if we go over your story one more time?
Yes.
What is your response?
I said, I don't know if I'm up to it.
And then you're asked, okay, and your response?
I'm really tired.
And then you're asked, okay, and your response?
I said, I can try, but I'll probably get things wrong.
Do you recall when you last ate before you were taken into police custody?
6 p.m. that night.
Notwithstanding that you told them that you were tired and you didn't know if you were up to it and you'd probably get things wrong, did they continue to question you?
Yes.
Did you continue to try to answer their questions to the best of your abilities?
Yes, I did.
Let's go all the way to page 174. I'm sorry, Stephen, 177. Now,
Okay.
the prosecutor asked you yesterday about whether you had been questioned continuously during this 8-hour span or whether you had time to sleep during that interval. Recall that?
Yes.
Did you sleep for a long period of time or a short period of time?
I think I slept for about 30 minutes toward the end.
We're at page 177, correct?
Yes.
How many pages are in the transcript again?
220.
And on the top of page 177, on line 3, what do you ask the officers?
It says, can I sleep?
And their answer?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was that the first time during your interview that you rested or you slept?
I don't know, I think so.
Looking at the bottom of that page, does that refresh your memory as to approximately what time it was?
Yes. Yes.
And what time was it?
It was 7:23 a.m.
Did you discuss the limitations of your uncorrected vision with the police officers?
Yes, I think so.
Turn to page 64, please.
Okay.
Now, did you ever tell the officers or state that you were totally blind or unable to see past a certain distance without your glasses?
Not that I remember.
What did you say about your vision on page 64 between lines 14 and 18?
Do you want me to read it all?
I'll tell you what, I'll chop it up for you. On line 14, are you asked, what is your vision like without glasses?
Yes.
What was your response?
I said shitty.
You're then asked, like what, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, he said like what?
The officer asked you, like what?
Yeah.
What was your response to that?
I said like within 10 feet, like further than 10 feet, I can't really make anything out but shapes.
The prosecutor showed you, I think, 2 or 3 still images from when you handed your keys to the police officers at the station that morning, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall the timestamp on those images were sometime between 4 and 5 in the morning?
That sounds about right.
You're not disputing that at that time and under those circumstances, you were able to take your keys out of your pocket, correct?
Correct.
Was the fact that you didn't have 10 to 12 highly intoxicated Delta Chi's chasing you
Objection,
something
leading.
that made it easier for you to
Argumentative.
do it at that time?
Mr. Barker, please let Mr. Davidson finish his question. Please re-ask your question.
Was the fact that there weren't 10 to 12 highly intoxicated Delta Chi's chasing you at that time something that made it easier for you to recover your keys?
And your
No.
objection.
Oh,
Mr.
sorry.
Safley.
Sorry.
Objection, argumentative, and leading.
Objection is overruled. The answer will stand.
No.
No, it wasn't easier?
It didn't make it easier.
It was no easier to do it without the guys chasing you?
I don't really understand what
I'm
you're
not asking
saying.
the question very well. Was it harder or easier to get your keys without being chased?
Without being chased?
Yes.
It was a lot easier.
Was your testimony yesterday the first time that you discussed the issue with your car keys?
No.
Turn to page 30, please.
Objection, this is outside scope, Judge.
Overruled.
Okay.
You see on line 7 where you're asked, was your car unlocked or locked at that time?
Yes.
What was your response?
I said it was locked.
Question, okay.
Mr. Jones, I never leave my car unlocked up here, but my keys, the fob is here.
Question, okay.
I realized after they put the handcuffs on that my car keys were in my pocket, but I didn't know that at the time.
Turn to page 104, please, Stephen.
Okay.
Between lines 5 and lines 21 on page 104, does that appear to be the discussion that took place as you were handing your keys over?
Yes.
On line 5, are you asked, so do you have your key with you? Can I see it real quick?
Yes.
Your response?
I do.
Question, do you always keep it in that right front pocket there?
Not usually.
Your response was?
Not usually.
Question, okay, can I see your key fob? Your response?
I said, yeah, that is always in my back left pocket.
Question. Okay, so the key fob that gets you into the car is always in your left back pocket.
Yes.
Your response?
I said, yeah, the keys are usually clipped with a carabiner or something right on my belt.
Question. Okay, were you wearing a belt tonight? Your response?
No.
For those of us who don't know, what's a carabiner?
It's like those little O-shaped clips that mountain climbers use to clip ropes and stuff.
The prosecutor asked you yesterday about when you stated or notified anyone that you believed that something had happened to your teeth. Recall that?
Yes.
Objection misstates the question and testimony.
Approach. Approach, please.
Prosecutor suggesting that you didn't say anything about your teeth until much later.
Objection misstates my question, Judge.
Overruled.
Yes.
Is that consistent with your recollection?
Not really.
Turn to page 4 of the 200-plus page transcript, please.
Okay. I'm there.
What did you say to Officer Park on lines 21 through 23?
I said, the fireman asked me if my tooth was loose. I said, no, but now it is. It's a little loose inside there. Is that bad?
Was that the only time in your interview that you talked about your teeth?
No.
Turn to page 117, please.
Okay.
Just sort of take a look at the whole page itself and let me know if it appears to you whether this page corresponds with a period of time during which photographs are being taken.
Yes.
Can you read lines 7 through 11?
Question. We will start from the top down. Keegan, can I get you to hold this on that side? Can you turn your head this way so I can get this? Can we get his lip just look straight ahead? And then I said, this is Mr. Jones, knocked out my bridges.
Finally, turn to page 122, please, Stephen.
Okay.
On line 17, are you asked, how is your tooth, by the way?
Yes.
What was your answer?
I said, it's starting to fall out.
What did you go on to say in line 20?
I said, it's swollen.
Now, in fairness, there's an unintelligible question between your statement it's starting to fall out and it's swollen.
Yes.
You referred, I think, both in your testimony and in your interview with the police to a bridge. Is that some sort of a dental appliance?
Yes, it's, I have 2 baby teeth right here, and then I had dental work to put bridges on top of them, and they cement those to the teeth on either side, and then kind of in your gum a little bit, and they're considered permanent. And and yeah.
Are you able to show the jury where in your mouth that bridge sits?
It's not in my mouth anymore.
The place where there's no teeth on your gum, is that where the bridge usually sits?
Yes.
Can you show it to the jury, please?
Right here.
Thank you, Steve. Stephen, let me just finally go back and ask you about a couple issues about the encounter itself the prosecutor asked you about. Do you recall there being some questioning about aiming straight up in the air while you were being pummeled?
Yes.
Was there anything going on at that period of time that may have made it more difficult for you to aim your weapon?
Yes.
What's that?
Like there were 5 or 6 or 10 people on top of me, and they were trying to get my gun, and they were kicking me in the head and the stomach and punching me, and I was getting pummeled on the bottom of a pile, and I was in a headlock, and someone was trying to twist my arm, and I was struggling.
What was the reason you fired the gun into the air?
I wanted to get them to disperse and run away.
When you made it to your car, how would you characterize the length of time that you were actually there?
Less than 5 seconds.
What was your emotional state at that time?
I was frantic and panicked. I was fumbling around, kind of like screaming to myself, like, oh my God, oh my God. And I was just, terrified.
Did you feel as though you had time to consider all of the options that the prosecutor proposed to you yesterday?
No, less than 5 seconds.
Did you describe that moment of this episode to the police during your interview?
I think I did, yes.
Can you turn to page 61, please?
Judge, I'm going to object as to the relevance and the scope. This wasn't challenged.
What lines are you referring to, Mr. Davidson?
Lines 3 through 8.
Objection is overruled.
Did you discuss that with the officers on lines 3 through 8 of page 61?
Yes.
What did you explain to the officers about that, Steve?
Do you want me to read it?
Yes, please.
I said, I'm in the car, I'm sitting there and I'm panicked. I don't know how I'm going to start the car. My legs are shaking. I don't know how I'm going to fuck with the clutch. I don't know anything. Like, they're going to be on me in a matter of like 1 or 2 seconds.
Is it fair to say that as you sit here today, and perhaps as you've sat here for a few weeks, if not months, that you acknowledge some of the information you gave the police may not have been entirely accurate now that we have the benefit of maps and Leica scans?
Objection
Yes.
asked and answered.
Sustained.
Even with the benefit, Stephen, of hindsight, Leica scans, and maps. As you sit here today, you feel that you were safe in your car.
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because there was a whole lot of them, and I was panicked, and I didn't know if they could just break the window and pull me out, or if they could do anything, really. I mean, I thought they were right behind me.
And moving forward from there, excuse me. For a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Moving forward from there, when you encounter Mr. Brew and Mr. Peering, fair to say at that point, you don't know whether or not Mr. Brew, or Mr. Peering for that matter, was the individual that sucker punched you moments earlier, correct?
No, I didn't know.
Let's assume hypothetically that it wasn't Mr. Brew.
Okay.
It may well be possible that as of that moment, as the prosecutor suggested, neither Mr. Peering nor Mr. Brew had laid a finger on you. True?
True.
What do you think would have happened had you waited for them to lay a finger on you before firing your weapon?
Based on what they were saying and how they were acting, their fists were balled up, and he like launched at me. So I assumed he was, either going to tackle me and they would start beating on me and try to get my gun, or maybe strangle me or something because his arms were outward. There was no possible way I wasn't going to get hit really hard with how fast he was coming at me.
The prosecutor also asked you about your ability to ascertain whether or not Jake and Shay were still in danger. You recall that?
Yes, I remember.
What was going on with Jake and Shay the last time you have a vivid recollection of being able to see them and know exactly what you were looking at?
They were surrounded, and I saw Shay get punched, and I saw both of them get shoved down to the ground. And a couple guys tried to grab their shirts, and they were getting yelled at.
At any point thereafter, up until the arrival of Officer Park, did you see, hear, or otherwise perceive anything to suggest to you that they were in any less danger at that point?
No.
Thank you, Steve. No further questions.
All right, I'll turn to members of our jury and see if they have questions for this witness. Looks like we do, so we'll seek counsel and court reporter at sidebar. right, Mr. Jones, I'm sorry, Steve. Violating my own protocol here. All right. Mr. Jones, the first question is, who taught you how to handle a gun? Were you taught gun safety? If so, by whom and at what age?
The first time I learned about gun safety was with the U of A, University of Arizona's 4-H club. They teach the principles of gun safety and basic handling and marksmanship. And then my dad taught me after that. And at 4-H club, I was around 8 or 9 years old.
The next question is, what is your vision without your glasses?
I don't know what my prescription is, but it's somewhere around 80-20 in my right eye and 60-20 in my left eye.
Were words exchanged between the two groups of guys after Jacob rang the doorbell?
I don't remember Jacob ringing the doorbell, but after they all came outside, they started yelling at us. Then Shay started saying stuff like, you know, what the hell is wrong with you, man? We're leaving, okay? Leave us alone. And it went back and forth like that.
You said you intentionally shot Colin and Nick Peering. Why?
Because there was an immediate threat to my life, I thought, and I had to stop it, and that's what I was trained to do.
Did you say, quote, nobody did anything wrong but me, and if so, why?
When the officers first got there, they were trying to see if anybody else had a gun, and they were asking me about my friends. They said, "Do your friends have guns? Did they do anything? Did they go upstairs? Are they still shooting?" Stuff like that. And I was trying to just let them know that, no, none of my friends have guns. Don't go arrest them, you know, stuff like that. But yes, I did say that, I believe. I don't remember saying it, but, I mean, it's on a body cam, I guess.
Did you waive your rights and speak to the officers during the 8 hours, or did you have an attorney with you?
I, at first, thought I should call an attorney, but then I just talked to them.
When you were in the car and when you got out, did you hear yelling and arguing that was coming from the direction of the service road?
Yes, a lot of it, a whole lot. It was just like the whole area was yelling.
Did you believe your friends were in the middle of the crowd where the yelling and arguing was taking place when you were in the car?
Yes, I did.
What is the extent of your first aid training?
I know CPR, the Heimlich maneuver. I know how to basically treat a gunshot wound, how to treat knife wounds and lacerations, and how to treat someone who's having a stroke or a seizure. It was a course I took from the Glendale Fire Department, I think.
The next question is, you put your window down to yell, "I have a gun." Does your Mustang have power electric windows?
I didn't. The door was open the whole time, but when I said I leaned out the window, I was leaning out the door. I just was trying to remember. Like in the transcript, I said I think I might have leaned out the window or something in that direction. But I don't really remember that much, but we know now that the door was open.
And when you were punching all your buttons on your key fob, did your horn go off?
Yes, the car alarm went off for a few seconds, and then as I was mashing it, it went back off. Like I hit the panic button, and then I guess I hit the panic button again, and it went off in the span of a couple seconds.
Are you nearsighted or farsighted?
I'm not sure which is which, but I can only see up close. I have like computer vision from sitting in front of computers, so I can't see far.
When you felt you were possibly going to lose your gun when the others were piled on you, did you feel you were the only one that could take control of this chaos?
I felt like I was the only one who was going to get me out from under that pile. I felt like no one was going to come and help me, and I couldn't overpower all those guys.
We've heard why you felt you needed to get your gun when you got to your car. When you saw that no one was around your car, why did you feel like you needed to approach the group in the corner of the parking lot? What was your thought process?
When I looked left after I had the gun, I still saw those two guys, and they were still looking at me. I think I could only see like silhouettes, but I could see them coming at me, and I couldn't just abandon my friends anyway. You know, even if no one was coming toward me, I still couldn't just ditch my friends and leave them there to get pummeled on the street by strangers. So it was kind of a mix of everything, I guess.
Could you identify any of your friends by sight after losing your glasses?
I think there were moments, like after the first punch and we were still real close together and I started running, I caught some glimpses of them. And then when I kind of paused and looked back, and the first time I saw Shay. And then toward the end, I think I saw a glimpse of Jake on the ground. But usually, like, during most of it, it was like by sound and seeing how they moved in their clothes and stuff. Because Jake was wearing a bright blue and neon yellow hoodie, so it was distinctive.
The next question is, did you have bruises from the 5 to 10 people that jumped you?
Yes, we looked at them yesterday, but I had that big welt right here and all the cuts and stuff. That was from getting either kicked or stomped in the head. I remember that. And then I'm pretty sure the road rash and the bruises on my back, and then all the defensive wounds and stuff on my forearms. And then I had a bruise right here that later on got really yellow and purple and big. That was all I can remember.
The next question is, why didn't you aim for the legs when you shot Colin and Nick Peering?
Under those conditions, well, I guess you're never really trained to do that. That's not police or military or any kind of training, and I wasn't trained to do that. But I couldn't have. It was, really dark, and they were moving really, really fast, and I was shaking, and I didn't have a perfect grip, and I couldn't even see my sights or anything. So I definitely wouldn't have been capable of that.
The next question is, when you ran to the door and your key didn't work, did you have to run back across the cement drive to get to your car? And if yes, did you cross the cement?
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. When you ran to the dorm and your key didn't work, did you have to run back across the cement drive to get to your car? And if yes, where did you cross the cement?
I never made it up to the entrance of Mountain View of the dorm. I never made it that far. I realized before I got to the door that I wasn't going to be able to open it. So I was probably in the middle of the sidewalk, the service drive, and then I turned right, so I never crossed it. I stepped off of it. Does that make sense?
The next question is, what position were you in when you fired the warning shot to scare the people off you?
I was definitely on the ground. The only thing I don't remember, I was kneeling to do first aid, and then when the guy put me in the chokehold, and the guy pushed me back. I went backwards, but I don't know if my knees were still on the ground or if they came out and my legs were fully extended. But I was like laying back, and I had my hand behind my back like this, and I was kind of pointed toward the sky. And then when I got my left arm free from the guy who was twisting it, I rolled on my left side and curled into like a ball, like the fetal position, and then covered my head like this, and that's where I got all the bruises and scrapes on my arm.
Follow up, Mr. Davidson. Yes.
Stephen, was shooting something that you did frequently with your father as an activity?
I wouldn't say frequently, but maybe like once every month or two.
Are you familiar with your father's qualifications to provide firearms instruction?
Yes, very.
Can you explain that to the jury, please?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
He was an Arizona Post certified instructor, which stands for Police Officer Safety Training. He was certified by the NRA and Gunsight to teach police officers and deputies and civilians handgun safety and basic training. He has probably 4 or 5 certificates from different handgun courses, from intermediate to advanced level, and then also instructor level, so like qualifying to teach other people. He, I think he was also pretty qualified when he was in the Navy. I think he was, yeah.
You mentioned Gunsight. What is Gunsight?
It's the most well-respected training camp site in the United States. They train military and police, and they have civilian classes as well. And they do all kinds of stuff. It's up in Prescott.
When you indicated to the police to the effect that you were the only one who did something wrong, how soon after the arrival of the police did that take place?
20 or 30 seconds.
What was the general scene or mood at the parking lot at that time?
Chaos. People were screaming and yelling, and people were getting handcuffed and put on the ground. And, you know, I just wanted to make sure the police didn't, you know, overreact and, like, try to shoot my friends or something.
Did you observe any officers with their weapons deployed?
Yeah, all of them.
Did they have handguns deployed or other weapons?
Rifles.
Fair to say you made that statement out of concern for your friend's safety and other people who were there?
Yes.
At any point during the course of your 8 or so hours with the police, did you ever make a statement to them that you did something wrong?
No.
Did you have an attorney with you during those 8 hours that you were being questioned by the police?
No.
Did you talk to an attorney during those 8 hours you were questioned by the police?
No.
Was your mother there during those 8 hours you talked to the police?
No.
Was your father there during those 8 hours you talked to the police?
No. I forgot to add something to your last question about my dad.
Sure, go ahead.
Objection, non-responsive.
I'll give him a chance to complete his answer.
Go ahead.
He trained Maricopa County Sheriff's deputies. That was the thing I forgot.
Was the manner in which you handled and discharged your weapon on October 8th, 2015 consistent with what you had been taught?
Yes.
Objection, Judge. Relevance, move to strike.
Time.
Overruled.
Prior to pulling your pistol out from behind your waistband while you were underneath the pile and firing the warning shots, did you also do anything verbally to try to protect yourself or to remove yourself from the situation?
I was just screaming help the whole time as loud as I could, over and over and over, from start to finish.
After you left the car with your pistol, let me strike that. At the moment you left your car with your pistol, were you intending on firing your weapon?
Absolutely not.
As you're walking from your car to where the shots are ultimately fired, were you ever planning or intending on firing your pistol?
No.
Was there any time prior to Mr. Peering or Mr. Brill charging, lunging, or bolting at you that you were going to fire your pistol?
No.
Were there people that you thought or expected to be in the Mountain View dorm that may have been able to provide you some protection from these guys?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
I was a pledge for Sigma Chi, which means
Outside the scope, what question is this referring to?
Yeah, I think it had to do with the location of where he was running, and so I'm going to, was asked by the jury, and so the reason why I think is beyond the scope of the juror's question, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
Thank you, Steve.
Mr. Barker?
Going back to that question about who taught you about guns and gun safety, you were taught how to do a double tap as well?
yes.
And that's what you described doing to Colin that night, right?
Yes.
And you were taught how to draw your weapon and shoot 2 rounds within a second, right?
Yes, that was a drill.
And I assume as part of your training you were taught when to use a gun and when not to use a gun, right?
Briefly.
So there was some self-defense training?
Mostly it was like the mechanical aspect, how to do it. But sometimes they brushed up, like brushed and told you when to do it.
Right. A little bit about the law?
No, just, when your life's in danger and what's the deadly threat and stuff like that.
So you never taught what the law was in regards to self-defense?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
I'm just following up on counsel's questions
I'll
about
allow
gun
it.
safety.
And Mr. Barker, let me hear it first. Let me decide the objection first before you start arguing.
I'm sorry, Judge.
I read the book, I think it was called Arizona Gun Safety Laws Handbook 2015 or something.
All right. And as part of your training, surely you were taught that you don't bring out a loaded gun unless you're ready to use it, right?
Something to that effect.
Okay. You said there's a question about you intentionally shot Colin and Nick Peering and why. You described it as immediate threat. How far away were they at that point?
At the time, it seemed like 5 to 15 feet.
Okay, and I think you testified earlier that They were sprinting towards you, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you had walked some 90 feet to get to them.
It seemed like 5 to 15 feet at the time.
Right. I know it seemed that way, but that's not what it was, right?
It was 90 feet.
So you did tell the officer nobody did anything wrong but me, right?
I believe so. I don't remember.
Do you have any reason to dispute what the officer testified to?
No.
All right. And that was sometime after you actually were arrested and put in that car, correct?
I think it was before they put me in the police car when the firefighters were looking at my injuries.
You think it was before Officer Park put you in the police car?
Or I think it was before he closed the door, but I was like sitting on the edge.
You were asked if you waived your rights, so you voluntarily talked to the police that night, right?
Yes.
You were asked a question if your friends were in the middle of this argument. You said you believed they were in the middle. How did you believe that, or why did you believe that?
Every time I saw them, they had been in the middle, and I already watched them get assaulted a few times. And from where I was, it never seemed like the group of people ever broke up or anything. They were all tightly packed, and I didn't see anybody else, so my friends had to be in there still.
All right, and let's just clarify the time frame. That was before you were at your car, right?
Before and during.
When you were at your car, you saw them being surrounded?
No, I just saw the big group.
You saw the big group 90 feet away?
Something like that, yes.
Okay, something like that. All right. When you were asked about extent of your first aid training, you said that you had experience or you knew how to treat gunshot wounds, right?
Very basically, yes.
All right, and so surely you understood that gunshot wounds can kill people,
Yes.
especially one shot to the chest.
Most of the time, chest wounds aren't fatal, but they are a lot of the time.
Right, or they could cause serious physical injury, right?
Yes.
You asked a question about why didn't you aim for their legs. Can you demonstrate how you were aiming at Colin and Nick Peering? Can you show us the stance?
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope, 403.
It goes to how he was aiming, Judge.
He wasn't asked how he was aiming. He was at.
The objection is sustained.
Were you aiming at the legs or the chest?
I was aiming
Your
for.
Honor, beyond the scope of the question.
The question was if they're aiming.
Mr. Barker, wait. The objection is overruled.
Thank you.
I was doing what I was trained, which was to aim for center mass, the center of mass,
Which would be chest area, right?
torso.
Okay. Where all the organs are?
Yes.
You were asked a question about if you ran across the cement. And just to clarify on that point, you ran up that driveway, that service drive, and then you stopped and you walked back, right?
One or two steps, yes.
And then you crossed into the parking lot from there, correct?
I didn't cross. I just left I didn't cross the drive. There was I was in the middle of it when I walked.
Right. So listen to my question. You crossed from the service drive into the parking lot.
Correct.
Okay. So I didn't hear your answer to the question of what position were you in when you fired the warning shot, in your words. Do you recall what position it was? Were you on the ground? Were you lying down when you shot?
Like I said, I wasn't sure if I was definitely on my back at first. I don't remember if my knees were still tucked in behind me or tucked underneath me from when I was kneeling, or if they had come out in front of me. And then later on, I was curled into a ball.
Could you have been standing up?
Absolutely not.
And you said you shot one time in the air, or multiple times?
Multiple times.
You said something about referring to the question regarding how you could identify your friends. You talked about their clothing, and you said by their sound. What kind of sounds were you hearing from them?
Just like their voices and yelling.
Okay, nothing about help me or I'm scared?
I heard them say they were scared at first.
You heard them say they were scared?
No, just like stuff like holy shit, you know. But I never heard them say I'm scared.
Right. And that was before you went to your car, correct?
Correct.
May I have a moment, Judge?
Yes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Davidson.
With regard to firearms training and your knowledge and what was going on in your head at the time, when Mr. Barker asks you about not bringing a loaded gun unless you're ready to use it, does that mean that you don't take possession of a loaded gun until you've already made the decision you're going to fire it?
No.
Is there a difference between being ready to use it and using it?
Yes.
Based on your understanding and the training that you received, is a gun unholstered only when it's time to shoot?
Objection, relevance, calls for legal conclusions.
Overruled.
No.
Based on your training and what you believed at the time, is a gun only brought to low ready when you're ready to fire it?
No.
Based on your training and what was going on in your head at the time this happened, is a weapon light only turned on once you're ready to fire a shot?
No.
In fact, once a weapon is actually pointed at somebody, that's something that can also happen before the
Objection.
decision to shoot has even been made, correct?
Just a second. Read the question back, Steve, please. The objection's overruled.
Could you repeat it, please?
I'll try. Does the fact that a weapon has even been pointed at somebody mean that the decision to shoot has already been made?
Oh, no.
Thank you, Judge.
Ms. Winters, be excused. Mr. Jones, thank you for your testimony. You are excused. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take about a 15-minute recess. Please remember the admonition. All right, 15 minutes. for standing, folks. Please be seated. Your next witness, please.
Thank you. Your Honor, the defense calls Dr. Edward French.
All right.
You solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God, or do you so affirm?
I so affirm. All right. Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Dr. French, could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Yes, my name is Edward French.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a professor of pharmacology at the University of Arizona College of Medicine
How long have you been so employed?
since 1988.
Can you please describe for the jury your educational and professional training?
Sure. I'll start with, I got my doctorate degree in pharmacology at UCLA in 1976, and then from there I did 3 years what we call postdoctoral research at the Salk Institute in San Diego, and then an additional year of research at the Max Planck Institute for Psychiatry in Munich, Germany, before taking on a academic position at the University of Maryland at Baltimore College of Medicine at the Maryland Psychiatric Research Center, where I was there until 1988.
What is pharmacology?
Pharmacology is basically the study of drugs or substances that affect our bodies.
Through the course of your studies and your instruction at school, are you familiar with the effects of ethanol, Xanax, and THC on the human body?
Yes, I am.
Were you engaged by the defense to assist in this case?
Yes, I was.
And just to be clear, you're being paid and have been paid for the time that you've spent on this case, correct?
Yes, I am.
Is that customary for expert witnesses in your field?
Yes.
Have you been paid to express or form a particular opinion?
No, I have not.
What is a benzodiazepine?
A benzodiazepine is it's actually a very big class of medications that are used for the relief of anxiety or muscle relaxation, in some cases for seizure control. There are many chemical substances within this class of drugs. The most common one, which I think most people are aware of, is Valium or diazepam. That would probably be the easiest example of a benzodiazepine.
Is Xanax also a benzodiazepine?
Yes, it is.
Are there certain benzodiazepines that have a more rapid onset of action than others?
Yes, there are.
Are there certain benzodiazepines that are more potent than others?
Yes.
If we were to talk specifically about Xanax, and by the way, is Xanax also referred to as alprazolam?
Yes, it is.
Xanax is a little easier for me to pronounce. So I'm gonna
Okay.
call it Xanax. Where does Xanax fall in that spectrum of benzodiazepines with respect to onset of action and potency?
It has a rapid onset of action and is considered to be one of the more potent of the benzodiazepines.
You indicated that, if I understood you correctly, benzodiazepines are sometimes used for the treatment of anxiety.
Yes.
And are benzodiazepines sedatives?
Yes, they are.
What is a paradoxical effect?
A paradoxical effect is exactly what it sounds like. It's a paradox. It's something that you don't expect to happen. And if you were talking about the benzodiazepines, should I go with that? Okay.
Please, doctor.
If we're talking about the benzodiazepines, people are prescribed benzodiazepines to reduce anxiety, to help them get to sleep, and maybe for a few other things. But sometimes it happens that the taking of a benzodiazepine will produce just the opposite effect. So a person will become, rather than sedated, they become excited. Rather than calm, they become irritable. And there have been many cases of documented individuals who become rageful and very hostile under the influence of a benzodiazepine. So that's a paradoxical reaction. The paradoxical really means that it occurs just out of nowhere. We don't really understand why it occurs, it just does. So individuals can be taking a benzodiazepine maybe for weeks, nothing happens, and all of a sudden, right out of the blue, they end up with a paradoxical reaction.
Have there been studies with which you are familiar that explore the frequency of paradoxical effects of benzodiazepines?
There have been attempts to try to really nail it down, and it's really kind of difficult. So there's a big range of numbers. One study will say maybe 1% of people who are on benzos will have a paradoxical reaction. Other studies say it could be as high as 13%. And I think the problem there is because of the individuals. So the underlying personality always plays a very, very big role in how drugs affect people.
Could you flesh it out a little bit? What type of underlying personality issues may either increase or decrease the likelihood that a particular individual will have a paradoxical effect of benzodiazepine?
People who are easy.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Sure. Can you repeat the question, Doctor?
Yes, please.
What type of underlying personality issues could either increase or decrease the likelihood that a particular individual may have a paradoxical reaction to a benzodiazepine?
Well, the clinical literature suggests that individuals who have maybe impulse control issues, in other words, people who can maybe fly off the handle easily, may be more sensitive to benzodiazepines. Individuals who have anti-social personality disorder may be another class of people who may be negatively affected by the benzodiazepines.
What is a disinhibitory effect?
Disinhibition?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I'll start by explaining a little bit about the brain, I guess.
Please.
So there is that part of our brain which keeps us under control, keeps most humans under control. It's right up here above our eyes. It's the prefrontal cortex. And it's exerting inhibitions on what we do. It keeps us on track, so to speak. And what disinhibition is there are substances, there are chemicals, there are drugs which will actually inhibit those parts of the brain so that we become more excitable. We take away the control mechanism. So we overreact in certain situations when we normally wouldn't overreact.
If hypothetically an individual were to experience a paradoxical reaction, let's say to Xanax, would disinhibition be one of the ways in which that could manifest?
That is probably the way, because the benzodiazepines, like Xanax, they act to inhibit that part of our brain, which keeps things under control. And there are other drugs which also do the same thing. So the addition of two drugs which act in that same way is kind of sets you up for problems.
Is there a correlation between disinhibition and agitation, toxic psychosis, hostility, and rage?
That's all part of the disinhibition. So we remove all those mechanisms that we have that are controlling our behavior and enabling us to process our environment and to figure out how we're going to solve this problem. And if you have these medications on board which prevent that from happening, then you can't process very well. So you cannot pay attention to things that are going on as well as you should. Your processing speed may be affected, so you may overreact. And so there are many things which happen when you have these substances that disinhibit.
Assuming hypothetically that a person were to experience disinhibition as a result of benzodiazepine consumption, would you expect that to be dose-related?
Yes and no. There are some studies which say that it is dose-related, and there are other studies that say because it's a paradoxical reaction and it can happen just out of nowhere, then it may be hard to say that a particular dose is going to cause a particular type of disinhibition.
Given the fact that Xanax is a benzodiazepine with a particularly rapid onset of action, is there any correlation between its likelihood to trigger a paradoxical reaction versus another benzodiazepine?
I don't think so, not on that basis.
Okay. Are you familiar with the term or the concept of a therapeutic dose or a therapeutic range?
Sure.
What is that?
Well, the easiest way to explain that is when drugs are being developed, which is what pharmacologists do, they are trying to develop a drug for a particular condition. And I think the easiest way to explain this is, let's say we are trying to develop a drug to reduce blood pressure by 25 millimeters of mercury, get 25 points down. So drug companies will go through a series of studies to figure out how much of a particular medication, that one they're making, will reduce the blood pressure by 25%. That's their therapeutic target. And so they come up with a dose, and they give that dose to you. They say, please take this once a day to lower your blood pressure. So that is where you get the therapeutic dose.
Does a particular individual need to be at the bottom or the minimum therapeutic dose before the particular drug or medication involved is having an effect on them?
No, and it gets back to the point that these are all dose-related. So if you take that particular drug and you don't reduce your blood pressure by 25 points, but you could reduce it by 10. So you still get an effect, but it's not the therapeutic target.
Is it possible for a hypothetical concentration of Xanax in a person's system at 4.3 nanograms per milliliter to affect that person?
Sure.
Are you familiar with any studies that have determined a lower threshold at which Xanax can affect someone?
I'm not familiar with the studies that have looked at all the various doses of Xanax. I'm not. So I can't really answer that.
Okay. Irrespective of being put on the spot and being asked to recall these specific studies, with regard to that particular concentration of 4.3 nanograms per milliliter, do you have an opinion as to whether that is capable of affecting a person?
Well, I think I'll try to answer that. I think I know where you're asking, but I'll try to answer it my way,
Sure.
Which is there are compilations of drugs where they lay out how much of a blood level would be therapeutic. So there are those data sources. So 4.1 or whatever it might be may not be in the therapeutic range. It could be below the therapeutic range. But the way I'll answer that is it does not necessarily mean that you would not get an effect from having a blood level of 4 of Xanax. You still could have a blood level, but maybe it's not producing the kind of therapeutic effect that it was designed to produce.
And at great risk of shifting gears, somewhat abruptly, talking about THC. Is that the active metabolite in cannabis?
THC is a psychoactive not a metabolite, a psychoactive active substance.
Okay, thank you. Are you familiar with any studies that would determine whether a concentration of 7.6 nanograms per milliliter would be capable of impairing the particular individual involved?
There have been many studies trying to pinpoint a blood level of THC which will affect a variety of behaviors. And the reason for that is more important now than ever because of the use of medical marijuana and states that are actually going to allow recreational marijuana. So there are studies now which are trying to find out what blood level of THC will cause a form of impairment, so to speak, in terms of driving or whatever it might be. There have been studies in the past which suggest that levels as low as 1.6 to 2 nanograms per milliliter in the blood can cause some form of impairment. Colorado actually established a level of 5 nanograms per milliliter as a level which, if you have that level in your blood, Colorado says you're impaired, at least in terms of the driving. So 7 would be kind of on the high side of what the studies have shown.
Okay. Are the effects of THC on the cognition and emotional reactions to individuals something that's been studied?
Yes.
Okay. How does THC affect one's ability to perceive events and to respond to them?
Well, it alters perceptions. Try not to be flippant about this, but for those who have had experience with THC, there can be distortions of sense of time, sense of time in a sense, sense of space. So perceptions can be distorted, for sure.
What about fashioning responses to external stimuli?
Well, THC slows our ability to process the things that are going on in our environment. It just basically slows it down. So the easiest way to think of all these substances and how they affect our behavior is, are they depressants? And the answer is yes. THC is a depressant, Xanax is a depressant, and there are other depressants that people take. So they all slow the process, our processing down. And they all take away our ability to focus our attention on particular things. So we may focus on one particular thing, but there may be other things that are very, very important going on around us that we don't pay attention to. And so THC does that.
We talked a little bit before, Doctor, about how one's underlying personality may contribute to the likelihood of a paradoxical reaction to benzodiazepines. Are there other things that can contribute to that, such as concurrent ethanol usage or alcohol consumption?
To the paradoxical reaction?
Yes, Doctor.
There's quite a bit of literature out there which suggests that you don't combine alcohol with a benzodiazepine because you get two substances which are profoundly disinhibitory. They both act on the same neurotransmitter system in the brain, which is controlling our ability to comport our behavior, and they both inhibit it. So when you add one on top of the other, you get a bigger bang for your buck.
In other words, they're greater than the sum of their parts?
Some people will say that they're additive, and then there are other people who say they're synergistic. In other words, they are 1 + 1 is 3 would be synergistic. Additive would be 1 + 1 is 2.
Is the effect to which ethanol or alcohol consumption may increase the severity of a disinhibitory reaction to benzodiazepines dose-related with respect to the alcohol level?
Yes.
So in other words, the more alcohol someone has in their system, the more likely it is, or the more profound the increase to the disinhibition would be.
That's exactly right, sure.
Are you familiar with studies that have been done related to humans' reaction to alcohol consumption at varying concentrations?
There have been a lot of studies about that, again, relating to trying to figure out what blood alcohol level we should say is causing a person to have a particular form of impairment.
Do all people react to alcohol the same way?
No,
If you have two people and they weigh the exact same and they're dosed with the same exact amount of alcohol, would they necessarily have the same reaction to it?
no.
What type of factors could potentially affect the extent to which someone will be affected by alcohol consumption?
Well, we know for sure that men and women are different. Women are much more sensitive to alcohol than men. That is a given. It's been studied over and over again. Again, if you have an individual who maybe has a little bit of a, let's say, a testy type of personality or an impulsive type of person, that person may respond to a dose of alcohol, which another person might not respond to. So there are the same kind of things that go along with the benzodiazepines.
What about tolerance?
Tolerance develops to alcohol, yes.
What is tolerance?
Tolerance is a condition where you need to take more of a substance to produce the same effect that you got the first time around. That's the easiest way to explain it.
Is alcohol, ethanol, a central nervous system depressant?
Very much so.
Does that mean that everybody who drinks alcohol will be sedated and passive?
No, because you go through stages, depending upon the amount of alcohol you're taking.
I realize that it may be difficult to ask, all the more so answer this question in the abstract, and if so, please let me know. I'll rephrase it. But would you consider a blood alcohol concentration of 0.208% to be a high level?
0.208?
Yes.
I would answer the question yes, but I would also say it depends on the individual's history of their use of alcohol.
If somebody has a blood alcohol concentration of 0.208, does that necessarily mean that that person is stuporous and sedated?
No, not at all.
Let's take it even higher. Let's assume we're talking about somebody with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.285%. If somebody has that amount of alcohol in their system, does that necessarily mean we would expect them to be in a stupor or sedated?
No, not at all.
Which benzodiazepines are most frequently associated with paradoxical reactions?
Well, as far as I can recall, every benzodiazepine that is out there has been linked to a paradoxical reaction. I think that the high-potency ones with the fast onset, like triazolam and alprazolam or Xanax, I think have been found to be probably more problematic.
Are you familiar with any studies that have explored the correlation between acute or chronic marijuana usage and premature responding in conflict situations?
There have been studies that have looked at that, and again, it gets to this issue of what marijuana does to our processing ability. Our processing kind of slows down. We lack the ability to attend to particular things as well as we should, and so we may process in an abnormal type of way and react in an abnormal type of way to that situation.
What about the effect that THC has on one's ability to inhibit an inappropriate response to external stimuli?
THC reduces our ability to inhibit a response, so we get more inappropriate responding.
And what about the role THC plays in one's ability to process external stimuli in a conflict situation?
Well, that's what I was getting at, because under the influence of THC, we don't attend very well to everything that's going on around us. And so in a very difficult situation, let's say, an interpersonal kind of conflict situation, we may not be attending to everything that's happening in that situation, and we may just respond to something that's right there in front of us, and that may be an inappropriate response.
Shifting gears back to benzodiazepines, is it the case that if someone is taking Xanax, that it's a binary situation? In other words, are they either going to be disinhibited or sedated?
No, it's not.
It could have no effect at all.
Well, yeah, actually, there are people who don't have much of an effect from benzos, yes.
Or it could affect them but not manifest in either of those ways?
Yes, exactly.
Are you familiar with the process by which the body metabolizes THC?
Yes.
How is THC metabolized by the body?
Well, it's metabolized very, very quickly, actually, by the liver, by liver enzymes. THC is a very interesting substance because its effects usually don't last very long, and it is removed from the blood very quickly because it likes to enter tissues that have a lot of fat content to them. So it leaves the blood very quickly. Onset of action occurs within minutes after people smoke it. Peak effects may occur within 30 minutes, and the effects may be over within 2 hours. Blood levels are almost negligible at 3 hours. But it's metabolized. It is broken down by liver enzymes.
Assuming hypothetically you have a situation where a urine sample is collected from a subject at 9 o'clock in the morning, and a blood sample is also taken at that time.
Okay.
The blood and the urine collected at 9 a.m. is tested for the presence of cannabinoids, and both of those tests are negative.
Okay.
What conclusions, if any, can you draw as to the presence or absence of THC in that person's system at 1 o'clock in the morning, 8 hours before the samples were collected?
So let me make sure I understand. So there's no cannabinoid in the blood or the urine at 9 o'clock in the morning,
Correct.
and you want to know how much would be there at like 9 hours before?
8 hours earlier.
8 hours earlier? You can't know that. It's not. You can't possibly determine that.
Okay. But can you establish that there was none, the person was not using marijuana at 1 o'clock in the morning if
No.
they test negative at 9 a.m. with their urine?
No, you can't. You can't say that there wasn't anything there or that there was something there because you don't have any evidence. There's no evidence.
Oh, let me ask it this way. How long after a person uses marijuana would you expect to see evidence of cannabinoids in their urine?
Oh, in the urine?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. So, yes, in the urine, there would be the metabolite, the carboxymetabolite of THC would be found in the urine, probably 12, maybe even 24 hours after smoking.
And certainly sooner than 8 hours. In other words, 8 hours would provide more than enough time for the body to metabolize the THC to the point where there'd be evidence of that in the person's urine.
Sure.
Thank you, Doctor. No further questions, Judge.
Mr. Shea?
Good morning.
Doctor, is there a difference between THC and THC-COOH?
There is a very big difference.
What is the difference?
THC is a psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, and THC-COOH is the inactive metabolite.
Okay. So that's not having, the inactive metabolite means it's not having any effect on a person's thought process or
Right.
any disinhibitory effects. Is that fair?
That's right.
So if one were to find a level of THC in a person's blood of 1.9 nanograms per milliliter, would you agree that that's a very small level, very low level of THC?
It is a low level, yes.
Okay. I'm going to jump around a little bit, Doctor. I'm sorry. Doctor, would you agree that most paradoxical rage reactions that have occurred between have been reported either in previously violent patients or in psychotic patients, particularly those suffering from schizophrenia? in whom benzodiazepines are reported to produce an increase in paranoid ideation and aggressive tendencies?
So let me clarify. Are you asking if the paradoxical reaction is mostly in people who have psychotics disorders?
Yes.
No, that's not true.
Well, a lot of the studies that have been conducted with regards to the paradoxical reaction have been in those types of populations. Is that correct?
There have been studies in those types, yes.
So when you say that the occurrence of a paradoxical reaction could be between 1% of the time or 13% of the time, the higher end of that is in specific populations with those types of histories. Isn't that correct?
I believe that the higher one would be in individuals who have, I think it's personality disorder problems, yes.
Doctor, would you agree that if a substance is only in a person's urine, that substance is not having an effect on them at that time?
I would say yes, it's not.
Okay. And I think counsel asked you, there's considerable variations in the effects of alcohol from one person to another. Is that right?
Yes.
And indeed, the majority of people do not become aggressive when they consume alcohol. Is that correct?
Oh, that's very true.
And further, aggressive behavior doesn't always involve alcohol. Is that right?
That's true. That's true.
And in fact, aggressive behavior actually decreases alcohol actually can decrease aggressive behavior in people. Is that correct?
It can, as the dose escalates, yes.
In most of the experimental studies on people showing aggression were done at lower BACs, like 0.06 and to 0.14, somewhere in there. Is that right?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Most experimental studies
Okay.
done with people as the subjects
Yes.
are done at BACs between 0.06 and 0.14. Is that correct?
Yes, they're done at the lower end for ethical reasons.
But there is anecdotal evidence that would suggest that people exhibit sedation at higher BACs over 0.20. Is that correct?
Sure.
What types of, what would people, typically, what are people experiencing when they're at a BAC between 0.21 and 0.29?
I'll answer that by saying that that would be an individual who has no history of alcohol use. So that would be someone who hasn't been drinking, and you would get them up to a level of 0.2, as you said, or whatever it might be, and they would probably have already gone through the disinhibitory phase. They would probably have already gone through the talkativeness phase, and they would still have impaired judgment. They would probably be stuporous in a sense. They would probably have slurred speech. They'd have difficulty maybe doing a field sobriety test. So it would be at that level in those individuals who have not been drinking.
Sluggishness,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
severe motor impairment,
Yes.
difficulties with perception,
Yes.
balance,
Yes.
gait.
Yes.
Indeed, one might expect to see impaired gross motor control even between 0.11 and 0.2,
In a naive person, yes.
even staggering.
Yes, in a naive person.
Increased reaction time,
Yes.
would you agree that the quantity of alprazolam or Xanax of 4.3 nanograms per milliliter is a relatively low level?
It is a relatively low level, yes.
Below therapeutic level, right?
Yes.
And the studies that investigate the studies that have observed the paradoxical reaction are within the therapeutic level, isn't that correct?
Most often, yes.
In fact, there's not a lot of studies discussing those low levels of Xanax. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes.
Paradoxical reactions are rare.
They are relatively rare, thank goodness.
In most instances, benzodiazepines diminish anxiety, fear, and irritability. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's why they're prescribed.
Isn't it true, sir, that THC has been shown to reduce the likelihood of aggression when combined with alcohol?
There have been studies which have found that. That's true.
Fair to say that experimental studies in animals and in humans demonstrate that the effects of acutely given alcohol engender a biphasic dose effect curve on a range of aggressive and competitive behaviors?
So biphasic, you mean, do you have a definition of what you mean by biphasic?
Well, maybe I can flesh it out a little bit. Would you agree that in low acute doses of alcohol, it's been observed that there is an increase of threat and attack behavior, but at high acute doses of alcohol in a variety of studied populations, including college students, there's a decrease in aggressive or attack behavior?
There have been studies like that, yes.
And .285 would be on that high level. Is that fair?
It would be for a person who does not have a history of drinking alcohol.
If I may have a moment, Judge.
Sure.
Nothing further at this time, Judge.
Mr. Davidson?
The prosecutor was asking you questions about the stuporous and sedative effects of alcohol at higher concentrations, correct?
Yes,
In response to his questions, you referred to a naive person.
yes.
What's a naive person in that context?
A naive person is a test subject who is not an alcoholic when you think about it. So when they were trying to figure out the blood alcohol levels which would produce certain behavioral changes, they didn't do those studies in people who had a history of drinking. They did them in normal, non-drinking people so they could set a standard, because once you enter into that realm of what people's history is, things change drastically. So a person can be an alcoholic, and I'll give an example of this because I work with a colleague who is a physician. An alcoholic can have a blood alcohol level of 0.3 and in some cases 0.4 and walk into an emergency room and be totally coherent about the problem that they're having. A 0.3 or a 0.4 in a naive person would probably put them into a coma. So it's the history which is very important. So when you're doing a study to try to find out what are the behavioral changes that occur with various amounts, you do it in what we call naive people. So you get a baseline.
It sounds like you're also describing some of the same concepts involved in tolerance.
That's exactly right, yes.
Does someone have to be a full-blown alcoholic, for lack of a better term, before their tolerance is going to affect the way higher concentrations of alcohol will affect them?
No, not at all.
So these studies that were done that show people being stuporous and having problems with balance and whatnot, and the other characteristics that Mr. Shea referred to, were done with people who basically usually don't drink at all.
That's correct. That was what the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration was trying to establish for a policy to determine what we would call impairment for people who are, let's say, pulled over for erratic driving and alcohol is on board.
So hypothetically, if you were dealing with somebody who has a weekly or a biweekly hang or a social event they participate in where alcohol is consumed, you would expect them to have a higher tolerance than a naive person.
Right. They have a higher metabolic tolerance, too. Their liver is able to break it down faster.
Is it possible you could have an event where a subject acts aggressively or violently, and they have 4.3 nanograms per milliliter of Xanax on board, and that Xanax plays no role whatsoever on their conduct at that time?
That's possible, sure.
I mean, a person could just be an aggressive person all the time, right?
That's exactly right.
If a person is coherent and communicative and is not demonstrating any deficits with their cognition at a blood alcohol of 0.208, does that suggest that person has tolerance for alcohol?
I would make that conclusion, yes.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right, let's turn to members of our jury and see if they have any questions for this witness. Looks like we do, so I'll see counsel and court reporter at sidebar.
All right, Doctor, the jury does have some questions for you. The first question is, if someone had been drinking alcohol for several hours and was at a 0.285% BAC at the time of testing, does the time frame in which they had been drinking affect the way the alcohol affects them or the reactions they have to the alcohol?
That's a little bit of a hard question. So the way I would interpret that is, if you start drinking alcohol, your body starts eliminating alcohol. And so, as you know, if you want to be careful at a party, you'll drink your 1 beer per hour, and you will probably walk away with the blood alcohol that will not label you as impaired. As you keep increasing the amount of alcohol taken over a shorter period of time, your blood alcohol level is going up. Your body is still eliminating it, but it can't eliminate it fast enough. So I'm not sure I'm getting to the answer that you were looking for, but you will gradually still increase your level of alcohol. But you start to become tolerant to some of the effects of alcohol as the blood level of alcohol increases. So some of the behavioral effects are lessened, but your blood alcohol level is still rising. I hope I answered the question.
The next question is, does drinking alcohol over a long period of time affect the typical stages a person goes through while drinking versus if you drank the same amount of alcohol in a short period of time?
Oh, that gets to the issue of what we call binge drinking. And binge drinking is taking in a very large amount in a short period of time. So in other words, instead of going to a party and drinking a beer every hour for 4 hours, you drink 4 in 1 hour. That is going to cause a bigger effect, for sure. Your blood alcohol level will be much higher.
The next question is, what alcohol history would be needed for a person to still be considered as naive? 1 beer a day, 1 beer a week?
I think generally the medical community basically says now that it's okay medically for males to have 2 alcoholic drinks per day, and for females 1 alcoholic drink per day. So the medical community really is kind of defining what they would consider to be a kind of a naive, maybe problematic drinker.
Follow up, Mr. Davidson.
If somebody is binge drinking or consuming alcohol, let's use the hypothetical 4 drinks that you used over a short period of time, is that more likely to result in a higher peak BAC than a person who consumes those 4 drinks over a longer period of time?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Is that due to the elimination rate?
Yes.
What is elimination rate?
The elimination rate is the time that it takes for the body to start eliminating a particular substance. So with alcohol, the elimination rate is approximately, on average, about 0.015 milligram percent per hour. That's on average. It may go up to as high as maybe 0.2 milligram percent per hour. So, but on average, you eliminate 0.015 milligram percent per hour of alcohol.
Is it pretty well understood that there's a range out there a range in the population with regard to person's elimination rate?
Yes, that's where the numbers come in. Where the average would be 0.015, so there might be a 0.012 versus a 0.2 in terms of elimination, because everybody's different.
Are there any social or other factors that could affect a person's elimination rate?
Social factors?
Let me back it up and ask more broadly. What factors might affect a person's elimination rate?
Their history of alcohol use could, because the more you drink, the more your liver deals with the alcohol that you drink. So the liver starts to gear up and start to figure out a way of getting rid of that alcohol. So a history of alcohol use could probably increase the rate of elimination.
And then if you take it further and a person reaches the point through either alcoholism or some other contributory illness, they have impaired liver function, do you expect the elimination rate to be affected by that?
Yes, if you have impaired liver function, then your body cannot eliminate the alcohol as efficiently as it normally could.
So these factors could either increase or decrease one's elimination rate.
Right.
Thank you, Doctor.
Mr. Shea.
Thank you, Judge. Just one question, Doctor. I think that you indicated, and correct me if I'm wrong, that as the consumption of alcohol is extended over time, that some of the effects of alcohol are diminished. In response to the first one of the jury's questions, I think you said that if you drink a fair amount over a longer period of time, your VAC is getting up there, that both the elimination rate can be slowed down, right?
No, the elimination rate is not slowed down.
It doesn't change?
No.
Okay, so, and then I guess my question was, did you say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that as you get into the higher BACs, some of the effects of the alcohol consumption are diminished?
Yes, I would say that, because what happens is the body starts, or the brain actually, starts to experience some development of tolerance to some of the effects of the alcohol. So you're not going to pass all of a sudden right from being perfectly fine to being comatose. So you're going to be escalating your blood level, your brain level, but your brain is starting to adapt a little bit. So you could have a high blood alcohol level, which in a naive person maybe would make them stuporous or maybe make them sluggish, but in another person, that may not be the case. They may be tolerating that.
And with those, and by that diminishment of the effect, would you include inhibition in that?
Disinhibition will always occur. That's basic.
Okay, so there's no reduction with tolerance of the disinhibition?
It occurs. The disinhibition will always occur, but with tolerance, it occurs at a higher blood alcohol level.
Okay, thank you.
Redirect.
No questions, Judge.
Can this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Doctor, thank you for your testimony. You are excused.
Thank you.
All right, folks, let's go ahead and break a little bit early for lunch. Please remember the admonition. We'll be back together at 1:30.